Okay, so this is my thought process on how I think that the performance went for the final major project. We started off with two rehearsals the day when we finally managed to get to the venue. It was at Brixham Theatre, so it was a seating capacity about 300, but the bookings said about 75. So that was what we were working with the day. So we knew that we had quite a little bit of an audience to get working up and to get them to a place where they could be at least interacted with. So we started off with rehearsal one. So rehearsal one, we figured what the set list was going to be because we didn't quite have a set. We didn't have a set list basically on set one and set two. We had a bunch of songs where they were quite slow and they weren't good enough for the pace of the performance, and it kind of dipped at some points, and then it was like really really high at like the beginning of set one, and then it just dipped, and then it kind of, we wanted it to flow basically. We set out the set list eventually so that we had each song in the most optimum place. On the day, we made sure that we had every single bit of equipment that we needed. We needed to bring over a synth and a piano for Black Diamond because they weren't already over at the theatre. So we made sure that we brought them over on the day, as there was already a performance going on before us. Now, one of the problems that I dealt with was having it to get a guitar. I didn't think of it much at the time because there would have been loads of guitarists just bringing guitars anyway, and I'm sure that one of them would have been in tune. But it wasn't in my mind that I would have to have brought another guitar with me to double check that it would have been tuned. Just so it was more like a personal guitar that I knew where it was so that I wasn't going to lose it, so I knew that it was going to be in tune. Luckily, one of the other performers had a guitar that I could borrow to use for the set. So that was Black Diamond sorted out the way for rehearsal 1 and rehearsal 2. Now, the original plan was that we were going to have Je te laisserai de mort instead of Little Lion Man, but we couldn't get it done in time, so we had to add Little Lion Man back in. We came across on the day that our percussionist couldn't figure out quite what they were doing, so we had to cut that song short because there was so much uncertainty around the song that I didn't quite know the lyrics. The percussionist didn't know the beats properly on the drum. They could play it on the cajon, but they couldn't play it on the kit. The feel of the song, it wasn't quite right. So in future for that, I want to try and at least get in a bit more rehearsal time. Like, it comes down more to time management again, really. It's because we didn't, we kind of cut the song Je te laisserai de mort and was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this because of the time restraint. It's just making sure that we can learn our songs and then perform them to that cut management. Again, that's another thing that I want to improve on, is making sure that we have that cut management in there, that time management. Because if we hadn't have done Je te laisserai de mort and we hadn't worried about that, we would have got Little Lion Man done and sorted, and we would have been able to do it for the set. But because we were doing Je te laisserai de mort and because we changed it, we didn't get it in the set in time. Moving on to Sweet Child of Mine. Sweet Child of Mine was one of the songs that was a little bit last minute, but we managed to get it in the set. The reason because of this is because we had rehearsal time previous to the actual FMP time. So since most of the band had already done this before, we already knew the lyrics, so there wasn't really much to learn. It was only just getting the song together, getting all the different parts together, and making sure that that song flowed well. Sweet Child of Mine was actually put on quite short notice. It was about a week before the performance, so that would have given us about 3 days worth of rehearsal in terms of amount of college time that we actually had. It really wasn't a much time that we had. It was about one session really, due to absences and things and people not being able to make rehearsals and things like that. So initially we had planned that Sweet Child of Mine would have been at the end of set 1, so it would have been the closure for set 1, but we changed it so that it would be the start of the set. It would be the opening act basically, just before My Hero, so it kind of set the premise for the show. This then added a little bit of pressure when I was performing, because I felt like I had to get it to the audience that they can interact with the show, that they can clap along and things like that. Basically, just warming them up ready for this entire hour and a half show that we have. And again, putting it to the beginning of the set was very last minute. I kind of knew like half an hour before the show and before it sunk in, and then I realized, oh, I'm starting off at the show. So I had to really calm myself backstage and make sure that I was properly focused to be able to give a good enough performance for that audience. I think because of this pressure, I was able to focus myself enough so that I could engage with the audience. But I felt as if I didn't give my best performance in terms of how I used my vocal techniques and how I presented myself on stage. Again, this mostly comes down to how nervous I was. Obviously, I was nervous because it's a big show. Because I was so focused on getting the audience's attention and saying, hey, you can interact, the singing didn't quite turn out exactly how I wanted it to go. I was definitely very pitchy, mostly flat, when it came to a lot of the quite high belts. I realized that I was flipping a lot. I was flipping a lot to head when I was supposed to be doing more towards a mix, especially going into the chorusy riffs that Axl Rose has. I tried to get it as accurate as possible to the original song, obviously taking a few liberties here and there when it did come to the belting, just because of how my timing is with the song. Sometimes I come in a bit early, sometimes I come in a bit late, depending on what that guitarist is doing, depending on what the guitarist is leading. Normally I run off with the cues from the guitarist, so if something's played a little bit different to what I'm used to, then I'm gonna either come in a bit early or late. This time I was okay. There was definitely a point in the song where I faltered, where I thought that we were going into another chorus, but we just skipped straight on to straight onto the solo. I didn't actually realize this at the time, and I thought that we were going into another chorus, so that's why I did that. I think in future that means that communication is going to be a big part of that, and just not like verbal communication, but just kind of giving each other signals from across the stage to say, hey, I'm gonna skip this part because we're kind of running over, just so that I don't falter like that again, or we have to do something like that. In terms of how I have stage presence, when it came to things like my posture, it definitely slacked a little bit, and I think that's where I kind of lost my core, and that's where the singing kind of dipped as well in terms of my presence. At points I did feel a little bit tight and quite awkward on stage, so that ties into the singing as well and the nerves. But that kind of affected how the audience saw me as a performer. In parts of the performance, I wish that I could have been able to have a bit more of a stage presence to let the audience interact. So, for example, when I tried to get them to clap, I physically had to do it above my head and tell them, you can clap, come on, warm up, let's go. Or when the guitarist was doing a solo beside me over at stage left, I had to physically make gestures towards him to get the audience to cheer for him while he's doing the solo, because it's Sweet Child of Mine. Like the guitar solo is what makes the song. It makes the song. Obviously, that was a little bit biased, but it's how we wanted to portray the song, and just to warm up the audience. Again, it was to warm up the audience. It's to say, hey, you can cheer for this person. If you can cheer for this person, you can cheer for the rest of the show. Please. And finally, moving on, we get to Black Diamond, our original as Truthers. Now, Black Diamond, obviously, I talked about the whole instrument situation and how we got it covered. I want to talk about more technical things now. Okay, so with how Sweet Child of Mine went, it went quite well with going down with the audience. So we're still in the first set, so the audience is pretty warmed up still. So I didn't worry too much about trying to please them. This was a performance where I really just wanted to get a good performance out there, especially because I was playing the guitar, so I was going to be kind of stuck to that microphone the entire time. That was definitely one of the things that was weighing me down because I like a lot of movement. I tend to move around the stage a lot. That's not because of nerves, it's just because I want to move and I need to be able to kind of ground myself, especially when I'm doing bigger things. For Black Diamond, necessarily I didn't have too much of big belts to do. I do have a big belt going out of the bridge in back into the chorus, but I felt like I didn't have to do that because I was stuck to that microphone. Black Diamond, personally, for me, was the better performance out of the two. Now, the thing about the song was a few nights before we did the show, I realized that Black Diamond was in the wrong key. And because of time constraint, there really wasn't much that we could do about it. So again, the vocals were a bit off because it was so out of my range, even though I made the song. I made the song's melody. I am completely at fault for putting myself in the wrong key. So for next time, get it in the right key. Get it so that you can actually play it in the right key on time for the show. A bit of an odd note, but the lighting, I really liked the lighting that was going on behind us. I definitely did kind of play a little bit to the lighting and how it was done. I made sure to kind of stay central to the stage by the microphone so that if they needed to use follow spots and things like that, that they could easily use them without me running around everywhere. Luckily, I didn't need to worry about follow spots. So for the rest of Black Diamond, playing the guitar was quite easy for me. In rehearsal, I lost a pick, so I had my jacket on me with a spare capo and some spare picks in there just in case that I lost a pick. I'm known for losing picks during performances. It's not good. Another thing I want to improve on is how I played the guitar there. So I had a polyrhythm over the top of the kind of clockish beat that was going on with the drums. I did actually struggle a bit because I had two different rhythms on the guitar that I used. So I had this kind of stabby staccato vibe for the verse of the song, and then I kind of let it ring out a little bit for the D7 and the chorus, and then back to the C minor. That was what was supposed to happen. But obviously, because of how I was playing and because I was fumbling a little bit on while moving up and down the fretboard, I couldn't quite do that. And another thing, I always had an issue with switching up the fretboard from the G minor and the C minor up to the major chords that we had in the bridge, and switching from the C to the D7 was okay because that was where the little we it was set to be a pre-modulation, so it was supposed to sound like that we were modulating, that we were going to go up a key, but instead we just went sliding back down, and that kind of ties in with the storytelling, which I explain later on in the vlogs. So in the end, Black Diamond went reasonably well. The other performers, we were all in time, we all had that strict staccato kind of feel to it. It gave it that very kind of rockish feel when we went into the chorus. We had that really nice rockish feel. Yeah. I think one thing that I really want to take away from Black Diamond is definitely having more time to get that sound check in and trying to figure out what the levels are like, especially with the distortion on the guitar, because I never had a set feel for what the guitar was supposed to be. I never had like exact settings, and I need to learn what is on that guitar amp so I know the exact settings of what to use, because I'm slightly inexperienced with an electric guitar. I'd much rather use an acoustic, but since it's a rock song, since indie rock, I had to use an electric. So it's kind of adapting and learning to adapt for the next song that we do. Okay, so in conclusion, what do I want to take from this? Well, Black Diamond, better out of the two. If there was something that I could do again majorly in the performance, is kind of look at my stage presence, look at the singing techniques that I could use, and maybe look into polyrhythms and things like that, and knowing how to keep in time. Especially like learning. I want to learn like the terms of different guitar patterns, because I've been doing guitar for a little while, so learning the actual guitar terms so I can actually put that into practice and into theory is going to be really good for me understanding how that song works in the theory of how the song goes and how we write it, because it can better help writing a song, if that makes sense. In the end, it was a really good show and a great learning experience of how to perform to an audience over 70. It was great. Learning how to warm up an audience, learning about stage presence and how to be backstage with loads of people at once, and just general things about just general practical experience, really. So yeah, that is the evaluation of a level 2 FMP performance.